Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We're very happy to continue bringing the park to you here at the Central Park Conservancy through virtual programs, such as our weekly walks held every Wednesday at 12:30. Today, we have a very special 30-minute virtual walk for you, where we're going to talk a little bit about America's pastime, otherwise known as baseball over here. So thank you for joining us today on a weekly walk titled Play Ball with me, Ryan, on today, November 2nd, 2022. Now, as we explore around the park today, we are going to be together for about 30 minutes, and you're going to see a bunch of photos taken by me here in Central Park over the past week, as well as a few that I've accessed through various databases, such as the Museum of the City of New York, the Library of Congress, as well as our Central Park Conservancy photo archives. Now, as we do begin our walk, I do want to thank you again for supporting us, the Central Park Conservancy, the nonprofit private organization that cares for Central Park, our mission being to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. Now, as we make our way through the virtual walk today, we are using Zoom, and you do have the ability to say hello, maybe let us know where you're joining us from, or maybe where you've played baseball, whether it be in New York City or anywhere else. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature. My colleague Desiree will be on the back end answering questions you might have. Last thing you'll see pop up are some visitor polls throughout the walk today. And on that subject, let me actually launch our first visitor poll, because one of the reasons we're actually doing this little walk around this time in this season is because the World Series is coming up soon here in America. So on that note, I would like to launch a little poll, which is going to be what was or when was the first World Series? I'm not a huge baseball fan, to be honest with you, but if I remember correctly, I think we have the Philadelphia Phillies and the Houston Astros in this current World Series for 2022. But in this poll, you can vote when you think the first official World Series was held here in America. So let everybody vote in that as we gaze over the route we're going to be walking today. A few little stops and some notable areas we visited before, but maybe some areas and pictures we haven't really seen. So we'll take a look as we make our way into the park, starting over at West 69th Street. But just to introduce our subject again, today we're going to be discussing baseball, which is otherwise known as America's pastime. That's a term that is said to have been derived over 150 years ago. The term I'm referring to is pastime. When baseball was really becoming popular in the 1850s, we see this term being applied to it because it was a way to pass the time. Baseball is an American invention, but it really derived from sports that were commonly played with bats, which usually descended from areas like England and Ireland. And they do have a lot of common ancestors, such as a game called rounders, which is often played over in England and I believe still played today. Baseball would develop its traditions and its rules really all on its own, becoming very popular in the 1850s, right around the time when Central Park was actually being created. The sport would go on to inspire more than just parade floats, such as the one we can see displayed here in a 1946 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And actually where we start along the park today is along an area that is used for the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade route. We do have that coming up in a little bit, as well as some other notable events we'll touch on a little bit throughout the walk today. But we're going to start diving into the park here at West 69th Street and start enjoying the beautiful little day we have. Luckily a little quiet, but that doesn't mean that there's still that there aren't still loud colors and loud activities going on in the park. And immediately upon walking in, we can see a beautiful bloom of some aster flowers. Even though we're reaching that mid to end fall season, we can still see a lot of late blooming beauty here in the park. Like, I'm not sure exactly what species of aster, but a beautiful lavender color applied to them. And very appropriately, right over in this area, we can actually find a quote by a gentleman named Theodore Roth. I might be saying that name a little bit wrong, Roth. Theodore Roth was an American poet who actually won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1954. And this quote appropriately reads, "Deep in their roots, all flowers keep the light." We're certainly seeing a lot of light shining through these flowers on this sort of otherwise overcast day. But as we make our way a little further into the park, we're seeing the sun starting to peek out. And as we walk down into the park a little bit, we'll enjoy not only some of the blooms, but also some of the open spaces we can find. It doesn't take too much walking in the park to find some open green space. And baseball's earliest beginnings can actually be traced back to New York's green spaces. I do want to just share that first poll, though, that we have. And it looks like we might have a lot of baseball fans in the group today because 46% of you guessed the correct answer. Or maybe it wasn't a guess, maybe you knew that 1903 was when the first official World Series was held in America. We see that being played between the Boston Americans and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the Boston Americans would win that series. I believe they won that series maybe 4-3. I'm not too sure, but 1903 is when we see this first official World Series occurring. We'll talk about baseball's more humble beginnings as we move a little bit further into the park. But as we look over these lawns today, we probably won't see many activities or recreational group sports being played on the small lawns. Baseball would evolve from cricket, which had been played for many centuries before the advent of baseball, and was really popular over in England. Today, you're not going to see really cricket or baseball being played on these small lawns, as we do see some larger areas designated for more team-based recreational play. But specific areas in Central Park were designated for recreation. We'll see some of those. We can even see some that exist today, like the bridle path, created specifically for horseback riding, as well as an area we know today as Hector ball fields that were used for organized play like baseball. Now, it's uncertain whether the photo we see here is a game being played in Central Park, but sites like this would be common throughout the late 19th to 20th century in Central Park. And as we travel through the park today, we'll find some of the early locations used for sports and activities, much like we see here in this photo. As we continue walking down a little bit, though, we're going to make our way to the east, but we do see a little statue gazing over a nearby meadow in this location. Here we can see the 7th Regiment Memorial Statue, a piece that was dedicated to the 7th Regiment, whose members fought bravely in defense of the Union Army for the American Civil War. We can see this statue just gazing out over towards the east, looking at a pastoral landscape that we're going to start making our way to. So as we cross the street and head a little bit to the east, we can enjoy some of the shade we get before we're exposed to the sun. Even in the early days of New York, before the city was heavily developed and populated, there wasn't much public green space to escape to. When Central Park was designed in the 1850s through a design competition, space for recreation was included in the park's designs. Egbert Viele, who was an engineer for New York City, designed an early plan for Central Park that featured a cricket pitch in the southwestern portion of the park. As we make our way over to this area today, we can see a small cricket pitch type of area. Now, although Egbert Viel's plan didn't win, the winners of the park's design competition, Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, also noted the usefulness of placing a cricket patch near the southeastern end of the park, or just the southern end of the park. It was close to train access and it retained a feature in the winning design, the greensward plan. We can still see that actually reflected here in the photos of the Bowling Green area of Central Park. This Bowling Green or cricket ground area was also used for baseball at one point. This little Southern Valley section was actually one of the first sections and landscapes in the park to be constructed. Around 1885, we see park officials opening up other areas of the park to be used for cricket, like those in North Meadow, some of the open areas in the northern 90s and 100s of Central Park to accommodate some of the other sports that were becoming popular, like baseball. People played cricket in the United States primarily in places like Philadelphia and New York until around World War I, when pastimes like tennis and golf start to become more popular and typically get played instead. Although a small flat meadow may seem easy to obtain and keep, this location receives a lot of annual maintenance to keep it pristine. Leveling out the landscape and resodding it helps to keep conditions optimal for play, and you certainly want a nice flat ground if you're going lawn bowling or playing something like croquet over here. Beyond lawn bowling, spectators can also watch some other types of stick games like croquet, and a lot of early stick games, again, leading to sports like baseball that we have today. Now, as we walk around this area, we can see that in order to play here, we do, like most recreational fields in New York City, need a permit to play here, something that has been a norm since the 19th century. In fact, in 1865, proponents of the national game of baseball complained that permits for Central Park fields were too hard to come by, and they were apparently giving preference more to the English game of cricket rather than baseball. We do see that being done away with when more areas are open for baseball in the park, which we'll talk about in just a little while. But as we start making our way south, we can leave this Bowling Green area and early landscape created in Central Park, and we can start making our way over to a much better known meadow, one known as Sheep Meadow. As we start to walk out through the fences onto this field, we get like a hazy cloud just immediately coming over us. Even though we have some sun shining down, it almost looks like it's about to downpour here. But here we get a nice view south over on Sheep Meadow. And much like the sport of baseball, a lot has changed here in Central Park in New York. Baseball's beginnings are kind of a little cryptic and murky, but Madison Square Park figures in at least some accounts of the sport's birth. Some note that in 1845, the rules of baseball were officially set by Alexander J. Cartwright, a 25-year-old volunteer fireman. And the game that we first really see being played in the vicinity of Madison Square is one that we associate today with baseball. But baseball very much humble beginnings here in New York. We do see early games of baseball played in Central Park, as well as the parade ground near Prospect Park, and even in Carroll Park in Brooklyn, where the Star Grounds once existed. In fact, the 1913 annual report listed regulation diamonds at 11 sites throughout Manhattan, including 2 at Chelsea Park. As we head a little bit more south, we can see where baseball will receive one of its official homes here in Central Park. We start to make our way a little bit towards the southwestern corner of Sheep Meadow. We can see some fencing, or rather bleachers, being set up over here. What we're seeing set up over here is the infrastructure for another historic activity in America, the New York City Marathon. It's actually occurring this Sunday, November 6th, 2022. And we are going to be featuring some programs relating to the marathon. So if you do want to learn more about the New York City Marathon, check out our virtual tour, which is going to be coming up in the next few days to week. You can check the chat box now, and I'll have my colleague Desiree drop some information for some of the upcoming marathon programs we're doing. But as we continue a little bit to the south right now, we'll walk through some other bleachers that we see set up just down the path. As we make our way a little bit down, we are coming to some bleachers that are permanent and here year long. As we make our way a little bit closer, we can enjoy just the beautiful color that this sugar maple directly next to this bleacher is sporting. The bleacher not only provides us a beautiful view at some of the foliage that we might see around the park, but it also gives us a nice little area to sit down, relax, as well as, of course, get a view over some of the baseball diamonds in the southern section of the park, these being known as Heckscher ball fields. As we come over here, I'd actually like to share a second poll with you. And this is, how many diamonds do you think can be found in Central Park? So how many baseball, softball diamonds do you think total exist in Central Park? Let everybody vote in that as we enjoy ourselves along Heckscher ball field a little bit. Now, from an aerial perspective, we can better see this area, or at least part of it. We can see 2 of this area's 6 total ball fields from this area section today. Heckscher ball fields today is largely used for softball, where several other baseball diamonds in the park today will be used for baseball and softball as well. But down here, primarily just softball will be played on these 6 diamonds. And although we don't immediately see anybody presently playing, this is the view that we can often get as we pass by the area, with these bleachers in the back allowing team members as well as spectators alike to enjoy the game. And of course, a lot of fun can be had down here, whether you're playing or whether you're just enjoying the game. And this area is very historic to see play like this being done, because in the 19th century, this section of the park was designed as the ball ground or playground, a place for playing field games and other types of activities such as cricket and baseball. Although the growing popularity of these games would lead planners of the park to develop more additional fields, they ultimately only ended up creating one initially, the area we know today as Heckscher ball fields, which we're walking around. This photo, which is coming from an early 1900s time in the park, believe we're in 1900, yeah, right around circa 1900 exactly. We're seeing play existing over here. But because of overwhelming demand for these areas, since there was only one created, they decided to prioritize the use of this landscape for children. Although it was sometimes difficult for 19th century baseball players to enjoy fields at Central Park, by the 1930s, when recreation became a top priority of parks, the game was embraced. During that time, we also do see some extra fields being added. And in 1934, we see an announcement for the informal fields that were created in North Meadow being formalized, getting actual clay diamonds with permanent backstops added. And as we come over here, I will share that poll. So this one tricked you a little bit better with this one. This one, we have 12% of people guessing the correct answer, which is 26. So 26 total baseball and softball diamonds can be found throughout the park. The largest collection we're seeing up here, I believe 12 at North Meadow. You'll find about 8 down at the Great Lawn, and we'll find 6 over at Hexter Ball Fields, where we presently find ourselves in the park. But this aerial shot of North Meadow shows you the largest collection of baseball and softball diamonds found in the park. This area also doubling as an area used for soccer, as well as some football games as well up here. But we do see the park holding tournaments for baseball throughout the 1930s, softball beginning in the late 19th century as an indoor version of baseball, but played with a larger, softer ball. And that was actually typically done during the winter seasons when baseball could be played outside. But we do see that eventually expanding to become an outdoor sport as well. Young players took advantage of the many fields and playground type areas, as well as parks like Central Park. We actually see Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia and the 5 borough presidents throwing out some of the ceremonial first pitches in the 1930s, such as around April 14th, 1935. We see some official pitches being thrown out, which helped to celebrate the opening of the city's roughly 159 baseball diamonds. That number has increased a bit today, and permits to play in these fields are still required. We see in 1940, permit applications must require the name of the team playing, the average age of the players, and whether or not the team was actually sporting uniforms. But as we make our way back into present day picture ball fields, we can enjoy how baseball and the popularity of it would also lead to some nearby features receiving their namesake and even just creation as well. As we move to the northeastern corner of Hexter Ball Fields, we can find a small building that exists there. One that's a little closed off today, but still sporting its more original type of beauty and design. What we come up to and see over here is the Ball Fields Cafe, or the Ball Players House. The building we see here today was inspired and created on the site of the historic Ball Players House that was designed by park co-designer Calvert Fox as a changing room for ball players. In the 19th century, the playground and the Ball Players House were open only to young boys to use for baseball and cricket. The original building, like many features of the park, fell into disrepair and was removed in the 1960s. We do see this replica, though, sporting its original design and much of the beautiful ornate detail we see along it. We do move a little bit closer, we can enjoy one of the best features, which is the beautiful decoration like this baseball mosaic centered right in the center here. A nice little design that's very fitting for the accompanying view just across the way. We can also find in the tile work along the structure some more baseball-like designs here. Unfortunately, this building isn't open or serving food or concession area purposes today, but it does still serve as a beautiful backdrop to the ball fields, and ones that we'll eventually see opening up and in use again here in the park. As we do make our way towards the south end of the ball fields, we'll head to our final destination or two to enjoy. And as we make our way down to the southwestern corner, specifically right now, of the ball fields, we can see one area that's a little bit different than the other 5 ball fields over here. The one that we see here is an unfenced diamond, and this one does not require a permit. So 5 of the 6 do require a permit, but this one right here is unfenced, does not require a permit, and is really open to first come, first serve play. Ball field number 3 is an unfenced, lesser groomed field that, again, first come, first served basis. It's open. So coming out here, you might not find the perfectly leveled off fields and the pristine condition you find at all of the regularly cared for diamonds. But this one does allow a lot of school groups or people that maybe even just want to run the bases real quick, opportunity to come out here and have that experience here in Central Park without a permit, of course. This field does still have a backdrop to it, but it does, again, usually contain some leaves and uneven surfaces. So you just want to be careful as you come out here. Now, although this area may look a little rough, it is nothing in comparison to the conditions that the fields used to remain in. In fact, this is what we would see typically occurring on Heckscher and many of the park's lawns and grassy meadows. This photo is from around circa 1970, before this area received restoration. Like many grassy meadows in the park, they were left to rot and they became dirty dust pits with little to no grass. A lot of soil compaction meant that these were hard dirt areas rather than the soft, cushiony grass that we have in the fields today. Little to no clay as well. That's just actual dirt and mud, not like the traditional clay you will find on the fields today. Luckily, we do see a lot of change occurring to the park, starting around the 1980s when the Central Park Conservancy forms from a group of volunteers and eventually earns a contract with New York City to help care for the park through private donation. Some of the first features being completed being meadows like Sheep Meadow, as well as Heckscher ball fields. We can actually see in this photo, which is circa 1990s, late 80s, early 90s, some restoration projects that were completed early on, like the meadows. You can actually still see a bunch of equipment on Heckscher over here, various types of infrastructure, sprinkling and irrigating the lawn, and also some of the grass just again fully coming in. Many lawns and meadows, they actually take several years to actually establish themselves in. So these projects are probably maturing for about 2 or 3 years before they actually reach this beautiful point that we see them in this photo. But of course, a lot has changed in Central Park, and all thanks to the private donation, support, and volunteers that helped to care for this 843-acre landscape. Now, while eroded or improper conditions are unlikely to be found in the park's ball fields today, there is one thing that players dread seeing: red flags. Red flags indicate that the ball fields and grassy meadows are closed for play. And these are often closed off after these conditions receive more flood-like conditions. Often closed to prevent further damage when fields get wet or flooded or just unsafe for play. We see flooding conditions on the fields commonly leading to them being closed, but luckily we do have expert staff caring for our fields. And we do have to give a very big thank you and commend our operations staff who do the backbreaking work to remove water buildup on these fields. This tedious work helps to preserve the field's shape. And of course, even just a little bit of water will affect all of the clay that's used for these fields. And once we see all this clay or all this water being removed, we do see a lot of regular weeding of lawns being done. Here we can see a few photos of a staff member as well as a few volunteers that are helping to keep these North Meadow ball fields specifically looking pristine and beautiful. And of course, the 26 ball fields in the park, we have so many because they are so beloved and used. And many of these areas really offer New Yorkers the ability to play on a field that's almost comparable to some of the minor league or even major league fields that you can find around. Of course, it goes way beyond just removing water and weeding, though. Fields also receive leveling and smoothing to help keep them in a professional play condition. If you actually do visit our website, you can even see some videos of some of our staff that are in charge of taking care of these ball fields. They take a lot of pride in making sure these fields conditions are really up to the standards of what you might see on like Yankee Field. So we do see a lot of amazing work going in here. Beyond the actual clay diamonds themselves, grass and turf receive a lot of ample care, regularly getting watered in hot summer months and also being aerated to keep the grass healthy and reduce soil compaction, which prevents those big dirt patches from forming like we saw in the pre-restoration photos. Of course, applying chalk and paint lines for the boundaries add the professional details that keep these not only picturesque, but functional for countless different organizations, school groups, and many more just private citizens to come and play in these fields. As we do flash back to our present day area and Hector ball fields on ball field number 3, we can really just be happy that today we see the park hosting baseball and softball and supporting levels of ball play. Little League teams such as the Harlem Little League play at Jackie Robinson Park, Holcomb Rucker Park, and Colonel Charles Young Park, as well as Central Park. So we do see a lot of use, not only in the northern ends, but also in the southern sections. Where we find ourselves presently along the Hector ball fields is where leagues like the Broadway Show League play. They take advantage of free afternoons to compete with each other at Hector Ball Field, as well as the Media League, which fields teams from many media organizations located in Midtown Manhattan. A favorite of ours, though, is certainly the Broadway League, so you can come see different Broadway plays organizations playing each other. You can come see the Bronx Tale take on a Lion King and so on. But you can find that schedule online if you were to Google Broadway Baseball League. But as we jump out of baseball field number 3, we can go see another feature along the southern end of Hector to end our walk, one that is a very commanding feature and attracts ball players and explorers alike. So as we walk a little bit to the south, we can find one of Central Park's most notable rock features, Umpire Rock. Umpire Rock, as we scale it up, we climb up this beautiful cropping of Manhattan schist, and we can see why people are making the sometimes difficult climb up here. We get a beautiful contrasting view of Central Park South and really get a interesting look down here to the south. But I think the true beauty of the view comes from when we're looking up north. When we do look north back at the ball fields, we can get a better idea as to why this rock bears the name Umpire Rock. It views over the surrounding ball fields, allowing us to see only a few today because they are a little obstructed from the mature trees that have grown out around into this area. But as we take a final little view over, we can really just enjoy these public spaces, and we can consider how public spaces like Central Park have played a role in the development of America's national pastime. In fact, Major League Baseball is also a big part of Park's history. The house that Ruth built, or Yankee Stadium, that's actually under the jurisdiction of the Parks Department. So we do see baseball and parks really going hand in hand, even with groups like the Knickerbocker Baseball League helping to develop the rules we see adopted and used by today's major baseball league organization. So for those who do watch the upcoming World Series, you can consider how this really amazing America's pastime had some very humble beginnings in areas like Philadelphia, Boston, and even here in New York City. So as we do come to the end of our little baseball walk today, we've of course only encountered about 6 of the park's 26 baseball diamonds. So as you do adventure around the park, visit the Great Lawn where you can find an additional 8, and North Meadow where you can find about 12 up there. But wherever you travel in Central Park, there's of course a lot of beauty to behold and a lot of area and space for recreation and enjoyment. I do want to thank you for joining us today and hopefully learning a little bit about America's pastime and its humble beginnings and roots to Central Park in New York City. We of course have plenty of other programming and available resources to utilize. If you do want to learn how some of our staff maintain the ball fields, you can visit our website and learn a lot about the care of North Meadow, Hector, as well as the Great Lawns ball fields as well. I will keep this open for a little bit longer in case there are any questions that we haven't had an opportunity to get to. But I do want to thank you all for joining us and encourage you to come back for more programs like our marathon virtual tour that will be occurring in the next week or so. You can find information for some of those programs in the chat box. But thank you again for joining us today. And from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.